Bookmark. Naomi Steele stepped onto the sunlit tarmac, her briefcase in hand, eyes fixed on the sleek private jet waiting before her. The aircraft gleamed under the morning sky, its engines humming a steady invitation to board. She glanced at her watch, then gave a small nod to her assistant, Ava Mitchell, who stood just behind her, reviewing the itinerary on a tablet. With a purposeful stride, Naomi approached the steps of the jet, her mind already focused on the high-stakes meeting ahead. Just as she reached the base of the stairs, a uniformed security officer abruptly stepped into her path, raising a hand to stop her. "Excuse me, ma'am," he said, his gaze scanning her from head to toe. "I'm going to need to see some identification before you board." Naomi's polite smile barely concealed her irritation. She was accustomed to security protocols, but this was unexpected. She had taken off from this very hangar countless times, and as the CEO of Steele Global Enterprises, her presence here was nothing unusual. Security was always briefed about VIP arrivals, especially hers. Still, she remained composed. "Of course," she said, though the request was strange. "My name is Naomi Steele. I'm expected on this flight." The officer's brow furrowed, his stance unmoving. "Expected or not, ma'am, I need to see documentation. We can't have unauthorized individuals boarding private jets." Sensing the growing tension, Ava stepped forward, her voice firm yet professional. "I've already emailed the flight manifest and all necessary clearances to your supervisor. If you check your records, you'll see N. Steele listed." But the officer didn't even glance at Ava. His eyes remained locked onto Naomi, his expression hardening. "I said I need ID," he repeated, his tone sharper. He took a deliberate step closer, resting one hand on his belt. "I don't know what your game is here, but if you're trespassing on private property, I have the authority to detain you until we sort this out." Naomi took a steady breath, forcing herself to remain calm. She had dealt with moments like this before, being questioned, doubted, underestimated. But this was different. This wasn't just skepticism, it was something more insidious. Slowly, she pulled out her corporate identification, the one bearing her photo and title as CEO of Steele Global Enterprises. Holding it out, she kept her voice measured. "Here is my badge. I own this jet. Now, I suggest you verify my details because I have a flight to catch, and we are already behind schedule." Ava lifted her tablet. "All the information is right here as well. It'll only take a moment to confirm." The officer barely glanced at the badge before dismissing it with a wave of his hand. "I'm not buying it," he scoffed. "This is private property. I've never heard of you, never seen you, and—" He hesitated but didn't finish his sentence. But Naomi already knew what he wanted to say. She had seen that look before, felt that doubt in 100 boardrooms, at 1,000 meetings. "You don't look like someone who belongs here." Ava stiffened, anger flashing across her face, but Naomi gently placed a hand on her arm, a silent signal to stand down. Confrontation wouldn't change ingrained bias. Sometimes a more direct approach was required. Naomi squared her shoulders and met the officer's gaze with unwavering confidence. "Call your supervisor," she said, her tone firm. "Right now." The officer huffed in irritation but reached for his radio. Naomi caught snippets of his conversation, something about a suspicious individual claiming to be an executive. She rolled her eyes but remained silent. Inside the jet, the pilot waited patiently, well aware of Naomi's punctual reputation. The tension on the tarmac was thick. Moments later, a second security officer, this one older, with an air of authority, emerged from the hangar. His eyes widened in recognition as soon as he saw Naomi. "Ma'am, is there a problem?" he asked, turning to the first officer with a look of disbelief. "That's Naomi Steele. She's the CEO of the company that owns this jet." The first officer's expression shifted, flickering between realization and resistance. Naomi let out a slow exhale, but her resolve remained unshaken. "Thank you for clarifying," she said to the senior officer. "Now, if you don't mind, I'd like to speak with this man privately." The older officer nodded and stepped aside. Ava followed him but cast Naomi a questioning glance. Naomi gave her a brief, reassuring nod before turning back to the man who had just tried to detain her on her own property. She watched as uncertainty crept into his posture. He knew he had made a mistake, but there was still a flicker of defiance in his eyes, as if part of him refused to believe she truly belonged here. Naomi held his gaze, her voice unwavering. This situation could have been avoided, she said. I understand protocol, but the way you handled this was unacceptable. The officer swallowed, shifting uncomfortably under her scrutiny. I was just doing my job, ma'am, he mumbled. I didn't mean any harm. Naomi's expression didn't soften. This isn't about harm, it's about professionalism. You were prepared to detain me without even verifying my credentials. That is not how things are done here. She let the words settle before delivering her final statement. And considering Steele Global Enterprises oversees the security contracts for this facility, I think it's time for a change in personnel. The officer blanched. Wait, you're saying? Naomi lifted her phone and dialed. Yes, I'm calling your supervisor. Effective immediately, you're relieved of duty. His face turned ghostly pale. You can't just... But Naomi had already turned away, phone to her ear, handling business. From the top of the jet's stairs, the pilot gave her a respectful nod. Ava rejoined her, still fuming. Naomi met her assistant's gaze with quiet resolve. Let's go, she said. As she climbed into the jet, she heard the distant protests of the officer she had just fired. She didn't bother looking back. In the corporate world, actions had consequences. And today, Naomi had ensured that lesson was learned. Naomi's voice was firm, her patience gone. This situation is unacceptable. I do not tolerate discrimination in my company, nor from any contracted agencies, she stated coldly. She tilted her head slightly, eyes locked on the officer. You are aware that Steele Global Enterprises oversees the security contracts at this facility, correct? A flicker of realization, then panic, crossed Officer Bradley's face. He swallowed hard. I was just doing my job, ma'am, he stammered, licking his lips nervously. I didn't mean any harm. Naomi's expression didn't waver. This isn't about harm, she replied, her voice cooling. It's about professionalism. About not allowing personal bias to dictate how you treat someone. She held his gaze, unwavering. You were prepared to detain me without even verifying my credentials properly. That is unacceptable. The officer dropped his eyes to the ground. I apologize, he mumbled. Naomi inhaled slowly, keeping her emotions in check. Unfortunately, an apology isn't enough. Her tone was final. You've shown that you are incapable of handling your responsibilities without prejudice. I don't care what color or gender you expected me to be. What matters is that I am your employer. She reached for her phone. And as of this moment, I'm placing a call to your supervisor. You are relieved of duty, effective immediately. Bradley's eyes widened in disbelief. Wait, he stammered, his face paling. You can't just fire me on the spot. But Naomi had already dialed. She greeted the head of security with crisp efficiency, explained the situation in clipped, decisive words, and requested swift action. Within minutes, it was done. As she ended the call, Bradley looked ashen. He opened his mouth to protest, but Naomi silenced him with a single steely glance. I expect every single person in my organization, including contractors, to show basic respect, she said evenly. You failed. Collect your things. You're done. Ava, who had remained quiet but watchful, exhaled and stepped beside Naomi as the pilot appeared at the top of the aircraft steps. He gave Naomi a small, respectful nod, waiting for her cue. Naomi turned to him, her composure intact. Thank you for waiting, Captain, she said smoothly. We'll proceed now. As she climbed the stairs into the jet, she heard Officer Bradley's faint, desperate protests behind her. She didn't look back. Inside the jet, Naomi sank into the plush leather seat, her expression unreadable. Across from her, Ava's jaw was tight with anger. You okay? Ava asked softly. Naomi let out a tired chuckle, rubbing her temples. I will be, she sighed. This is just business as usual, unfortunately. Ava's fingers danced across her tablet as she made a few quick notes. I've already sent a report to HR, she said. They'll coordinate with the security firm. Do you want me to draft a formal statement? Naomi shook her head. Not necessary. HR will handle it with the security company. Right now, I need you focused on the upcoming negotiations. Ava nodded and turned her screen toward Naomi. We have a major deal on the line, one that could expand our global market share. We should make sure everything is airtight. Together, they reviewed figures, contract clauses, and key strategic points for the meeting. Soon, their conversation shifted away from the morning's confrontation and toward the weight of the upcoming acquisition. Steele Global Enterprises was on the verge of a game-changing deal, one that could reshape the corporate landscape, and propel Naomi's company into an even higher echelon of power. As the jet soared through the sky, Naomi allowed herself a moment of stillness. She had faced prejudice before. It had followed her since the early days of her career. But she had never let it stop her. Today was just another reminder that no matter how high she climbed, there were still people who believed she didn't belong. She whispered a silent vow to herself. Never back down. Never grow complacent. Her position as CEO wasn't just about success, it was about responsibility. She had a duty to her employees, to the future of her company, and to every person who had ever been told they didn't belong in spaces of power. She would set the example. She would show them all. A few hours later, the jet touched down in a different city. Naomi and Ava stepped off the aircraft with practiced composure. The pilot tipped his hat as Naomi descended. "Smooth flight," he said. She offered a polite nod. "Thank you, Captain." A black sedan was already waiting on the tarmac, its driver standing by with the door open. Without missing a beat, Naomi and Ava slid inside. As the car pulled away from the airport, Naomi felt the tension in her shoulders loosen, slightly, but in the back of her mind she knew the day was far from over. At the hotel conference center, a flurry of executives from the partner company greeted them, their smiles polished and professional. Polite handshakes, smooth introductions, corporate pleasantries. The business world was its own performance. And Naomi? She was always ready to take the stage. The corporate world had its own rhythm, a polished performance of pleasantries and hidden power dynamics. Naomi had spent years mastering the art of reading between the lines, sensing the quiet skepticism beneath polite smiles. As she entered the conference hall, she took in the scene. Firm handshakes, carefully measured greetings, the occasional sideways glance that questioned whether she was the executive in charge or merely an exception to the rule. At the head of the group stood Richard Langston, the lead negotiator for the firm Naomi's company was considering partnering with. A man in his late 50s, Richard exuded the confidence of someone used to being the most important person in the room. "Naomi," he said, extending a hand. "Pleasure to finally meet in person. Our calls have been productive. I'm looking forward to ironing out the details today." "Likewise," Naomi responded, her handshake firm, her expression unreadable. "We've prepared all relevant data, and I believe this partnership has significant potential for both of our companies." Richard nodded approvingly and signaled for everyone to take their seats around the long, polished conference table. For the next several hours, the room was filled with sharp analysis, cost projections, and strategic discussions. Naomi remained unshaken, her insights delivered with clarity and precision. Ava provided data points as needed, her efficiency making it clear why Naomi trusted her implicitly. Yet through it all, Naomi couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. Mark Caldwell, a younger executive from Richard's team, sat across from her, his eyes flicking to her every time she spoke. His expression was a strange mix of skepticism and something colder. It wasn't just doubt, it was the unmistakable look of someone who questioned whether she belonged at this table at all. Each time Naomi explained a point, Mark hesitated just slightly before responding, just long enough to make it clear he was second-guessing her expertise. She knew that look. She had seen it before, too many times to count. But Naomi Steele didn't get to where she was by backing down. She tackled every subtle challenge with hard facts, solid reasoning, and an unwavering tone. If Mark expected her to falter, he was in for a disappointment. As the session wrapped up, Naomi stood and extended her hand to Richard once more. He looked genuinely pleased. "This is heading in a great direction," he remarked. "I'd love to continue the conversation over dinner if you're free." Naomi glanced at her watch. "I have a few calls to make, but dinner sounds good. Let me handle a couple of things, and I'll meet you at the hotel restaurant downstairs." Richard smiled. "Excellent. My assistant will confirm the time." As she gathered her papers, she felt Mark's stare again. This time, he approached, a cautious smile on his face. "You certainly know your stuff," he said, though his tone teetered between a compliment and something more condescending. "I've been with Langston's firm for years, and I've never seen a negotiation quite like that." Naomi gave a polite but distant nod. "I'm glad you found it insightful. Every deal is different, and at Steele Global we pride ourselves on refining our approach." Mark ran a hand through his hair, glancing briefly at Ava, who was closing her laptop. Right? He muttered. Well, I guess I'll see you at dinner. Naomi watched as he walked away, a strange sense of unease settling in her chest. She turned to Ava, who raised an eyebrow. You felt that too? Naomi murmured. Sure did, Ava replied, crossing her arms. Reminds me of that security guard from this morning. He's trying to figure out why you're where you are. Naomi exhaled slowly. Let him keep wondering. Back in their hotel suite, Naomi made a few quick but crucial calls. First, she checked in with Steele Global's headquarters, confirming that another major venture was proceeding on schedule. Then, she dialed Daniel Carter, her CFO, to get an update on the company's financials. He picked up on the second ring. Naomi, he greeted. How's the negotiation going? Promising, she replied, skimming her notes. We laid out our terms, and they seem receptive. I'll know more after dinner with their team. Good to hear, Daniel said. Everything on my end is moving smoothly, though I do have a small concern. Naomi straightened. Go on. Daniel hesitated, then sighed. We've seen an influx of HR complaints. Nothing major yet, but some employees are mentioning that the work environment feels tense, especially for employees of color. It's not a crisis, but I want to address it before it becomes one. We've always been proud of our company culture, and I don't want to let anything slip through the cracks. Naomi grimaced slightly. I just dealt with an incident at the hangar this morning, she admitted. We need to make sure every department, including contracted personnel, understands our values. She thought for a moment, then made her decision. Schedule a leadership meeting for next week. I want all department heads in one room. We can't afford to ignore this. You got it, Daniel said. I'll coordinate with HR. Thanks, Daniel, Naomi said, glancing out the window at the glittering skyline. The weight of leadership had never felt heavier. She was running a multinational enterprise, closing deals that would shape its future, and yet she also had to fight against bias, doubt, and invisible barriers at every turn. But Naomi Steele had never been one to shy away from a challenge. She ended the call, took a deep breath, and turned back to Ava. Let's get ready, she said. Dinner is just another part of the negotiation. Ava nodded, already preparing their notes. Naomi cast one last look at the city lights before heading to her room to change. Because she knew one thing for certain, the real battle hadn't even begun. The weight of the day settled heavily on Naomi's shoulders as she prepared for dinner. The negotiations had been intense, a pivotal moment for Steele Global Enterprises, but beyond financial projections and strategic alignments, she was battling something deeper. The subtle skepticism, the doubt that lingered behind polite smiles, the unspoken question of whether she truly belonged. A soft knock on the door pulled her from her thoughts. Ready when you are, Ava said, her voice calm but perceptive. Naomi grabbed her bag and joined her in the hallway. Together, they made their way to the hotel restaurant, a refined space with warm lighting and hushed conversations. At a table near the large windows, Richard Langston waved them over. Mark Caldwell was already seated, along with a few other executives from Richard's team. As Naomi took her place, the conversation began effortlessly. Industry trends, market expansions, the usual polished banter of corporate elites. But Naomi felt it. Mark's eyes would drift toward her, assessing. His expression was guarded, his posture too deliberate, like someone waiting for confirmation of a suspicion. Over dessert, Richard raised his glass, a toast to a partnership that will set a new standard in this industry. Everyone clinked glasses. Naomi forced a smile, though her mind was elsewhere. Something about Mark was off. She wasn't sure why, but instinct told her she was being scrutinized, not as a business leader, but as a question mark. When dinner concluded, Naomi excused herself to step into the corridor and check flight schedules for the following day. Then she heard it. Low voices. Curious, she took a few careful steps toward the source and recognized Mark's voice. I'm telling you, he whispered to someone unseen. Richard is eager to close this deal, but something about Steele Global doesn't sit right with me. Maybe it's Naomi. There's something about her that just doesn't scream stable leadership. Naomi's jaw clenched. I want to do some digging, Mark continued. If she's just a figurehead, we can push for better terms. That was enough. Naomi stepped out of the shadows. Interesting conversation, she said smoothly. Mark flinched, his head snapping up. Naomi's face was unreadable, calm but with an edge of steel. "Sorry to interrupt your private chat," she continued, each word measured, "but I couldn't help overhearing." Mark's eyes widened. He tried to recover, forcing a casual smile. "Oh, I didn't see you there. We were just discussing corporate strategy." Naomi tilted her head slightly. "I see," she said. "Let me assure you, I'm no figurehead. I built this company from the ground up. I've led it to consistent growth for years. If you have concerns about my leadership, you're welcome to bring them to our next official meeting." Mark blinked rapidly. "No, I apologize if that came out wrong. You've been very thorough in negotiations. I was just speaking out of turn." Naomi studied him for a moment before giving a curt nod. Without another word, she turned and walked back toward the restaurant. This wasn't the time for a confrontation. But Naomi was more convinced than ever Mark Caldwell was going to be a problem. Bias, whether subtle or overt, was still bias. She reminded herself that skepticism was part of the gauntlet she had chosen. If she had let every doubt derail her, she would never have made it this far. Instead, she would let the success of Steele Global speak for itself. Back at the table, the dinner party was wrapping up. Richard turned to Naomi. "We're heading to the lounge for drinks. Care to join us?" She gave a polite smile. "I'll have to pass, early morning tomorrow." Richard nodded in understanding, and Naomi excused herself. Once inside her hotel suite, she let out a long exhale. The day had been exhausting, from the confrontation at the hangar to Mark's whispered doubts. Ava lingered by the door, arms crossed. "That man makes my skin crawl," she muttered. "If he's going to be part of this partnership, we need to stay vigilant." Naomi removed her heels, sighing. "Agreed, but we also need to see the bigger picture. If Richard is truly on board, Mark might just be a minor obstacle. We'll handle him the way we handle everything, professionally and strategically." Ava nodded but didn't look convinced. "Try to get some rest. Tomorrow is another round of talks, and you'll need to be sharp." Naomi sank into the armchair by the window, gazing at the city skyline. She thought of Officer Bradley, the security guard she had fired that morning. She thought of Mark's dismissive attitude. She thought of the HR complaints Daniel mentioned. The confluence of these events weighed on her, a stark reminder that prejudice wore many faces and always seemed to surface at the most inconvenient moments. But Naomi hadn't built Steele Global Enterprises just for herself. She had built it to pave the way for others, and she wasn't about to let anyone undermine that. Naomi had barely slept, her mind restless with the weight of the day ahead. By early morning, she was up, seated at the hotel desk, reviewing the final documents for the last phase of negotiations. A familiar blend of anticipation and focus coursed through her. She thrived on challenges. This was where she excelled. Dressed in a tailored navy suit, she met Ava in the lobby where their driver was already waiting. The city glowed in the early sunlight as they drove to Langston Industries headquarters, a towering building of steel and glass, its tinted windows reflecting the sky. Inside, Naomi took in the pristine reception area, where polished floors gleamed and well-dressed staff moved with purposeful efficiency. Yet, beneath the professional facade, she could sense it, a subtle hierarchy. The unspoken awareness of power dynamics, the lingering skepticism from those who still struggled to accept a black woman at the helm of a major corporation. She and Ava were swiftly escorted to a sprawling conference room where Richard Langston, Mark Caldwell, and other executives were already seated. Naomi shook hands briskly, took her seat, and opened her portfolio. Richard cleared his throat. "Let's pick up where we left off. We've had some internal discussions, and Mark here has a few points he'd like to clarify." Naomi arched an eyebrow. She turned to Mark, who shifted uncomfortably in his seat, shuffling his papers as if searching for something to anchor himself. He cleared his throat. "Yes, first, I'd like to say that we value this potential partnership. However, I do have concerns about Steele Global's organizational structure and potential gaps in leadership." Naomi remained impassive. Mark continued, his voice teetering between feigned professionalism and thinly veiled doubt. "Could you walk us through your reporting structure and approach to crisis management?" Ava's pen tapped lightly on the table, a small but telling sign of tension. Naomi tilted her head slightly. "Of course," she said smoothly. With absolute confidence, she outlined Steele Global's hierarchical structure, cross-functional teams, and robust crisis management protocols. She provided clear examples of how her company had navigated economic downturns, regulatory challenges, and complex acquisitions. Mark continued pressing for weak spots, searching for flaws in her responses. But there were none. After half an hour of his relentless questioning, Richard finally gave Mark a neutral glance. "Thank you. That was insightful," he said. "I believe Steele Global has demonstrated a solid track record." "Anything else, Mark?" Mark hesitated, flipping through his notes one last time, but he found nothing. "No, that's it for now," he muttered. Richard turned back to Naomi with a conciliatory smile. "We have just a few remaining contract details to finalize. If we can work through them this morning, we'll be set to move forward." Naomi nodded. "That sounds good to me. Let's do it." By midday, the negotiations were wrapped. Both parties had agreed on fair and mutually beneficial terms. Richard slid the final signed agreement across the table, and Naomi affixed her signature with deliberate precision. As she shook Richard's hand, the moment felt heavy with significance. This was more than just a deal, it was a statement. Steele Global Enterprises had cemented its place on the global stage. As the executives gathered their materials, Naomi caught sight of Mark standing off to the side, arms crossed. No smile, no congratulations, just the quiet, lingering weight of his doubt. Naomi refused to let it matter. Her work would speak louder than his skepticism. She and Ava stepped into the bustling city street. Ava exhaled, glancing at Naomi with relief. "It's done," she said, a small smile creeping onto her face. "Congratulations, Naomi." Naomi allowed herself a rare moment of satisfaction. "Thank you, Ava," she said sincerely. "You've been amazing, as always." Ava grinned. "Now let's get to the airport. We've got a lot to handle back home." The ride to the airport was quiet, both of them lost in thought. For Naomi, her mind was already shifting to the next battle. The security guard's firing had been just one piece of a larger puzzle. Daniel's mention of HR complaints about subtle bias within the company still weighed on her. If there was a cultural issue festering within Steele Global, she needed to root it out, swiftly and decisively. The flight home was smooth, free of the tension that had clouded their departure. This time, Naomi boarded her own jet without interruption. She barely acknowledged the security personnel on the tarmac, a silent reminder of the morning's incident. Upon landing, Naomi's focus hardened. She turned to Ava as they exited the jet. "Head to the office and prepare a managerial meeting," she instructed. "I want every department head in one room. We need to address this issue directly." Ava nodded. "Understood." The car ride to Steele Global's headquarters was swift. Naomi stepped into the sprawling lobby, pausing just long enough to acknowledge the receptionist, a young woman who greeted her with a genuine smile. Naomi took pride in knowing she had built a company where employees felt seen and valued. But now, she needed to ensure that culture extended to every corner of her organization. With that thought, she strode toward the conference room, where a long, oval table awaited. It was time for the next fight. The conference room was already filling as Naomi arrived. One by one, the department heads filed in. Finance, marketing, operations, legal, human resources, and more. Daniel Carter, Steele Global CFO, was the last to enter, offering Naomi a small nod as he took his seat. Once everyone had settled, Naomi rose to speak. "Good afternoon, everyone," she began, her gaze steady as it moved across the room. "I've called this meeting to discuss something that goes beyond our standard metrics and targets." A pause. "I have been made aware of incidents within our company and among our contracted personnel that suggest we have work to do when it comes to mutual respect and inclusivity." Her voice was firm, unwavering. "I will not tolerate discrimination of any kind. This is not negotiable." She briefly outlined the incident at the hangar that morning, explaining that the security guard had been immediately dismissed. Then she turned to the HR complaints that Daniel had flagged. Though she did not disclose specifics, she made it clear that the concerns were serious and would be addressed. "We take pride in being innovative and forward-thinking. That includes our corporate culture." Naomi continued. Then, she leveled her gaze at the team. "I want to hear from each of you. How do we ensure every member of our organization feels supported, valued, and heard?" She turned first to Monica Hayes, the head of human resources. Monica, what's the immediate plan to address these complaints? Monica cleared her throat, flipping through a folder. We've drafted a company-wide diversity and inclusion training curriculum, along with new protocols for reporting discrimination. She looked around the room. The plan is to implement mandatory sessions for all employees, from leadership down. But for this to be effective, we need full support from every department. Naomi nodded. That's a start. I also want an anonymous feedback system so employees can voice concerns without fear of retaliation. Daniel leaned forward, clasping his hands. We also need to look at who we're contracting with. He added, that security guard this morning? He wasn't one of our direct employees. He was with a third-party firm. We need to ensure every vendor we work with aligns with our values. I'll coordinate with legal, he continued. We should add new clauses to our contracts, requiring regular training on anti-discrimination policies. The discussion that followed was candid and productive. Some department heads acknowledged subtle biases they had witnessed. Others proposed mentorship programs, pairing new hires from underrepresented backgrounds with senior staff. Naomi took copious notes, impressed by the willingness of many to collaborate. Yet she could sense underlying tension. She had seen it before. Corporate culture shifts were rarely smooth. There would always be resistance from those who viewed inclusivity efforts as unnecessary, or worse, as a threat to the status quo. As the meeting wrapped, Naomi gave a clear directive. Monica, I want the detailed plan for the training programs by the end of the week. Daniel, you'll handle vendor contracts. Everyone else, keep your eyes and ears open. Encourage open communication. If someone has a concern, let them know we're listening. The room slowly emptied, leaving Naomi alone with Daniel. He hesitated, then spoke. There's something else, he said. Naomi raised an eyebrow. Go on. Daniel sighed. We've had a spike in negative comments on our social media pages. Naomi frowned. Negative how? He shrugged. People claiming Steele Global is a hostile workplace, that we discriminate against certain groups. Ironically, some are calling us racist. Naomi exhaled. Let PR look into it. It could be an organized attempt to stir controversy. Maybe a disgruntled employee or an outside group with an agenda. We need to find out if there's any truth to it, or if it's just noise. Daniel nodded. I'll have our team investigate. After he left, Naomi sank into a chair. Exhaustion crept in. It was incredible how quickly one incident, one rumor, could threaten to overshadow legitimate work. The timing of all this felt too convenient. Almost like someone wanted to damage Steele Global's reputation, just as they were securing a major international deal. Naomi picked up her phone. There was only one person she trusted to give her an honest legal perspective. She dialed Vanessa Liu. A familiar voice answered. Naomi, Vanessa said warmly. I heard about the expansion. Congratulations. I assume you're calling about something else, though. Naomi gave a small, tired chuckle. You know me too well. She briefly recounted the day's events, the security guard incident, the HR complaints, and now the suspicious online backlash. Vanessa listened patiently. When Naomi finished, there was a brief pause. Then Vanessa spoke, her tone efficient and measured. I'll do some digging, she said. The online attacks might be a coordinated smear campaign. As for the internal issues, you handled the security guard situation exactly as you should have, and it sounds like you're already putting the right structures in place for HR. Naomi closed her eyes for a moment, absorbing the reassurance. Thanks, Vanessa, she murmured. You know I've got your back, Vanessa replied. Talk soon. Naomi set the phone down, staring out of her office window. The skyline glittered against the night sky. She had built Steele Global Enterprises from the ground up, but with success came scrutiny, and not all of it was fair. She knew she had made the right decisions today, but tomorrow would bring new battles. And she would be ready. Naomi leaned back in her chair, exhaustion creeping into her bones. The call with Vanessa Liu had given her a small sense of relief. Firing that guard, establishing clear policies, and reinforcing company values. You're handling this exactly as you should, Vanessa had assured her. Let me check if there are any new defamation or legal concerns we need to keep an eye on. Thanks, Vanessa, Naomi had replied, her voice softening slightly. I appreciate it. Always here for you, Vanessa had said. Talk soon. Now Naomi sat in silence, gazing out of her office's massive windows. The skyline stretched endlessly before her, a testament to how far she had come. But with success came scrutiny. A woman like her, running an empire like this, some people would always look for cracks, waiting for an excuse to tear her down. For the next hour, Naomi carefully reviewed the final version of the contract she had signed with Richard Langston's firm. Every clause had to be airtight. No surprises, no loopholes. Everything looked in order, except for a minor dispute arbitration clause that she flagged for clarification with legal. Her phone buzzed. A message from Ava. Ava, media request from local news about the security guard story. They want a statement. Naomi sighed, quickly typing back. Naomi, refer them to PR for now. We'll craft an official response if needed. Ava's reply came within seconds. Will do. Naomi pressed her fingertips against her temples. It wasn't even midday, and the day already felt like it had spanned a full week. But leadership wasn't about dodging challenges. It was about confronting them head-on. She rose from her chair, smoothing her blazer, and stepped out of her office. There was work to do. One of the best ways to maintain morale was to show her presence. As she walked through the corridors of Steele Global's headquarters, employees greeted her with nods of respect. She recognized new hires in the marketing department and took a moment to personally welcome them. How's the onboarding process so far? She asked. A few looked surprised that the CEO was speaking directly to them. One of them, a young woman, smiled nervously. It's been great so far. I appreciate the mentorship program. It's helped a lot. Naomi nodded. Good. And if you ever have concerns, my door is open. A few employees asked about the rumored mandatory inclusivity training. Naomi patiently explained that it wasn't about punishment, but rather about creating a stronger, more inclusive company culture. Some looked relieved, others remained skeptical. She understood. Trust took time to build. By mid-afternoon, Naomi returned to her office, only to find a man waiting there with a weary expression. He introduced himself as Eric Dawson, the new head of facilities. She had only spoken with him briefly before, so she gestured for him to sit. Is there something I can do for you? She asked. Eric fidgeted slightly, adjusting his tie. I'm here about the security guard incident, he admitted. Naomi's expression didn't change, but she leaned forward slightly. Eric swallowed. That was my responsibility to manage. I should have ensured the security firm was properly briefed about our VIP protocols. I failed to do that. He hesitated. I just wanted to apologize, Miss Steele. That situation should never have happened. Naomi studied him for a moment. His remorse seemed genuine. Apology accepted, she said evenly. But in the future, I need you to be proactive. That guard's behavior was completely unacceptable. He demonstrated a fundamental misunderstanding of both his job and the people he was supposed to protect. Eric nodded quickly. Absolutely. I've already scheduled a meeting with the security firm's regional manager to make sure nothing like this happens again. Good. Keep me updated. Naomi watched as he left, feeling a complex mix of frustration and understanding. She knew that mistakes happened, but accountability mattered. She could work with someone willing to take responsibility and improve. The rest of the afternoon was a blur of emails, calls, and impromptu discussions. By evening, Naomi packed up to head home, replaying the day's events in her mind. A lucrative international deal finalized, a corporate culture shift in motion, a media storm brewing in the background. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. It always did. As she drove home, she allowed herself a rare moment of peace. She thought of her parents, who had always pushed her to excel, knowing that her success would open doors for others. She thought of her father, a lifelong educator, and his words from years ago. Your achievements aren't just yours, Naomi. They belong to every little black girl who wonders if the boardroom has a seat for her. Those words fortified her. She changed into comfortable clothes, fixed a light meal, and scrolled through social media. A few posts caught her attention. People accusing Steele Global of hypocrisy. The details were vague, but the pattern was clear. Someone was trying to control the narrative. Naomi's jaw tightened, not on her watch. The pattern was clear. The repeated phrases, the orchestrated attacks. This wasn't just random online chatter. It was a coordinated effort. Naomi made a mental note to inform Vanessa Liu and the PR team. The smear campaign against Steele Global was growing. Before heading to bed, she reviewed her calendar. Tomorrow, an internal leadership session, a follow-up call with Richard Langston's team, a check-in with Monica and Daniel on the new training initiatives. She exhaled slowly, sinking into the pillows. The day had started with an unjust accusation of trespassing, which she had swiftly rectified with a termination. But that single moment on the tarmac had mirrored a larger reality, a reality she had faced her entire career. Yet, if there was one thing Naomi had proven, time and time again, it was that she would meet every obstacle with the same decisive action. She would not be undermined. Naomi woke to the gentle vibration of her phone. A message from Ava. Ava, head of security firm wants a meeting. The fired guard is threatening legal action, claims wrongful termination. Another message followed. Ava, also, Mark from Langston's team called, wants to schedule a personal discussion about the partnership. Naomi let out a quick exhale. A new day, new challenges. She typed a reply. Naomi, set the meetings. Let's handle it. On the drive to work, Naomi mentally prepared for the potential lawsuit. She had no doubts about her legal standing. The security guard David Briggs had been fired for clear misconduct. But she also knew that in corporate America, the truth didn't always matter as much as the optics. As for Mark Caldwell, she suspected he was looking for leverage, either to push for concessions or to undermine her leadership. Neither option would work. When Naomi arrived at Steele Global's headquarters, she was met with an unusual quiet. Employees greeted her cautiously. Conversations seemed hushed. She caught snippets of whispers. The lawsuit? Is the company restructuring? What if the deal falls apart? Naomi considered calling an all-hands meeting to address the rumors. But not yet. She needed to gather more facts first. Inside her office, Ava was already waiting with a coffee and a folder full of documents. Ava sighed. The security firm's regional manager, Laura Chen, will be here at 10 a.m. She sounds frustrated. Naomi took the coffee. Thanks, and Mark's call? Ava folded her arms. He was cagey. Said he had information that could affect the partnership, but wouldn't say what. Naomi set the folder on her desk. We'll handle Laura first, then Mark. One crisis at a time. Ava nodded. Just know that the rumor mill is spinning fast. Some employees are worried about layoffs. Others think we're selling off divisions. Naomi's lips pressed into a thin line. Let them talk, she said. Our focus is on building, not dismantling. At exactly 10 a.m., Laura Chen entered Naomi's office. Her expression was tight, her movements sharp. She wore a crisp blazer, her demeanor exuding controlled authority. Naomi gestured for her to sit, while Ava remained near the door, taking notes. Laura got straight to the point. Miss Steele, I'll be direct. David Briggs is alleging racial discrimination in his termination. Naomi's eyes flickered with disbelief. Racial discrimination? She repeated. Laura continued. He claims you singled him out and failed to follow proper disciplinary protocol. Naomi leaned back, arms crossed. He refused to acknowledge my credentials, escalated the situation without cause, and multiple witnesses can attest to that. Laura raised a conciliatory hand. I understand, and I'm not here to defend his actions. She exhaled. Our internal review shows that he acted inappropriately. However, he insists that your decision to fire him on the spot was a personal attack. He's claiming he had no prior warnings or remediation attempts. Naomi felt a flash of irritation. Do I need a warning to fire someone who attempts to detain the CEO on her own jet and then speaks to her with blatant disrespect? Laura shifted in her seat, looking uncomfortable. I understand, she said. Our policy typically allows for progressive discipline, but as the client, you hold full discretion. She hesitated. The issue is that he's now talking to a lawyer. He's threatening a wrongful termination suit. Naomi's expression remained impassive. Let me guess, he's claiming I fired him out of some personal vendetta, rather than for cause. Laura nodded. Yes. Naomi leaned forward, hands clasped. He's trying to flip the narrative. Her voice was calm, but sharp. Let me be very clear. I have witnesses, documentation, and legal standing. If he decides to sue, we'll meet him in court. Laura exhaled slowly. We value your business, she admitted. I wanted to inform you directly so we can align on legal strategy. My team will likely coordinate with your legal counsel. Naomi nodded. That's fine, she said. But in the meantime, I strongly suggest you reinforce your training and hiring process. We can't risk another employee like him. Laura nodded stiffly. Understood. As Laura left, Ava let out a quiet whistle. He's definitely flipping the script, she muttered. Naomi shrugged. Let him. She picked up her phone. This is why I have Vanessa. Ava grinned. Now on to crisis number 2. Mark's call? Naomi tapped her fingers against her desk. He's up next. She dialed his number, preparing for whatever move he was about to make. Naomi offered Laura Chen a curt nod. Keep me informed, she said. I have zero tolerance for these kinds of stunts. If Briggs is violating a non-disclosure agreement, feel free to pursue your own legal measures. Laura rose from her seat. Thank you for your time, Miss Steele. I'll be in touch. As soon as the door closed, Ava let out a quiet whistle. He's definitely flipping the script. Naomi shrugged, refusing to be rattled. Let him, she said. Vanessa will handle the legal side. Now, let's deal with Mark. Ava placed the call. Within minutes, Mark Caldwell's voice filled the office. Smooth but with a calculated edge. Naomi, he greeted, I wanted to bring something to your attention, something that might affect your company's financial standing. Naomi exchanged a glance with Ava. Our financials are publicly audited, and we work with a top-tier accounting firm, she said. What exactly did you find? Mark cleared his throat. I've come across some documents that suggest Steele Global's financials might not be as solid as you've led everyone to believe. Naomi's jaw tightened. Go on. There's a discrepancy in your reported earnings from last quarter, Mark continued. What you shared in investor calls doesn't fully align with what was filed with regulatory agencies. It's not a huge gap, but it's noticeable. Naomi forced herself to stay calm. We file accurate reports. If there's any variation, it's likely due to timing or currency conversion factors. That's standard for multinational operations. Mark pressed on. Perhaps, he said, his tone deceptively casual. But if I were you, I'd be prepared to explain it. Rumors spread fast. If your expansions are built on shaky financials, that's a problem. Ava's expression darkened. Naomi's tone turned icy. Thanks for your concern, Mark, she said. I'll have my CFO verify everything. A beat of silence. Is there anything else? She added. Or did you just call to warn me about imaginary issues? Mark chuckled softly, but there was no warmth in it. I'm trying to help. We're partners now, after all. I'd hate to see you compromise the deal over an oversight. Naomi didn't take the bait. She ended the call before he could say another word. As soon as the line went dead, Ava crossed her arms. He's fishing for leverage, she said, either to undermine you or to squeeze out better terms. Naomi nodded, already picking up her phone to dial Daniel Carter. When Daniel answered, she relayed Mark's claims. Daniel sounded genuinely perplexed. I'm not aware of any discrepancy, he said, but I'll double-check the numbers. Give me an hour. As Naomi hung up, she paced her office, heels clicking sharply against the floor. He's either bluffing or he's orchestrating something, she muttered. I can't stand manipulative tactics like this. Ava nodded. He's probably hoping you'll offer concessions to keep him quiet, or that you'll slip up and reveal something he can use. Naomi narrowed her eyes. I need to stay one step ahead. If there's any minor discrepancy, we'll clarify it. If not, we'll expose him for trying to stir trouble. An hour later, Daniel called back. The only potential difference I found, he said, is in how we reported revenue from overseas branches. Currency fluctuations caused a slight mismatch, but it's fully documented. I wouldn't call it a discrepancy. More of a technical accounting nuance. Naomi exhaled slowly. So Mark is twisting an innocent detail to cause doubt. Looks like it, Daniel confirmed. Naomi relayed the update to Ava. So if he tries to weaponize this against us, Ava mused, we just present the official explanation and move on. Naomi nodded. Exactly. End of story. Still, the fires kept burning. Briggs's legal threats, the ongoing training initiative, the social media smear campaign, and now, employees whispering about culture changes. Naomi let out a small, dry laugh. Just another day at the office. Determined to stay ahead of the storm, Naomi went straight to her employees. She visited the marketing department, where the newest hires were gathered in a small lounge area. Tell me your thoughts, she said, settling into a chair. Some employees were enthusiastic about Steele Global's direction. Others hesitated, then admitted they were uncertain. The controversies, one of them said carefully, make things feel unstable. Naomi met their gazes, her expression steady. Let me be very clear, she said. This company's commitment to integrity and inclusivity is unwavering. No social media attacks, no bad faith lawsuits, and no corporate games are going to change that. She let the words settle. I built Steele Global to be a leader in this industry. That means setting a higher standard. And yes, that makes us a target. She leaned forward slightly. But leadership isn't about avoiding challenges, it's about facing them head on. By the time she left, she could feel the shift in the room. Doubt had been replaced by a sense of purpose. That's the power of showing up. Back in her office, Naomi's phone buzzed. A message from Vanessa Liu. Vanessa, something interesting. I looked into the social media attacks. A lot of posts are using the same phrases. It's coordinated. Naomi felt her pulse quicken. She had suspected as much, but now she had proof. Among Steele Global's longtime employees, some voiced frustration about the mandatory inclusivity training. It feels like we're being told we've been doing something wrong, one employee from operations said carefully. Naomi listened intently before responding. I understand the concern, she said. But this isn't about pointing fingers. It's about reinforcing our values and making sure we're all working in an environment where everyone feels respected. Some employees nodded slowly in agreement, others still appeared hesitant. Naomi knew that true change wouldn't happen overnight. Trust had to be built. As the day drew to a close, Ava knocked on Naomi's office door. One last thing, she said. We got an interview request from a major business publication. They want to do a cover feature on you. Naomi raised an eyebrow. It could be a good opportunity to highlight your successes and address some of the recent chatter, Ava added. Naomi considered it for a moment. It might help us control the narrative, she admitted. Let's go for it. But I want to review the questions in advance, Ava smiled. Will do. The next few days followed a familiar rhythm. Naomi moved from meeting to meeting, smoothing out internal conflicts, clarifying financial concerns, strategizing for continued growth. She noticed that Mark Caldwell had gone quiet after their tense phone call. Meanwhile, Richard Langston sent congratulatory messages about the official partnership launch, seemingly unaware of Mark's attempts to stir doubt. During a midweek leadership session, Monica Hayes presented details of the upcoming training program. Naomi listened carefully, then gave her input. I don't want these to just be slide presentations, she said. They need to be interactive workshops, engaging, meaningful. Daniel Carter then updated the room on Steele Global's vendor compliance clauses. Any external partner that doesn't align with our inclusivity standards, he said firmly. They're out. Naomi nodded in approval. The company was moving in the right direction. But then, her phone buzzed. A message from Vanessa Liu. Vanessa's voice was calm but serious when Naomi called her back. I've been tracing the negative posts, Vanessa said. A handful appeared to be bots or sock puppet accounts created in the last week. Naomi's fingers drummed against her desk. They're all pushing the same narrative, that Steele Global is a hostile workplace for minority employees. Naomi's jaw tightened. It's obviously orchestrated. Any leads on who's behind it? Naomi asked. Vanessa hesitated. Not yet, but I suspect it's someone with an agenda, maybe a competitor or a disgruntled former employee. We're still digging. Naomi exhaled slowly. All right, she said. Keep me updated. With that knowledge in hand, Naomi immediately directed PR to release a statement. The message was clear and unwavering. Steele Global was committed to an inclusive workplace. They were actively implementing new training to reinforce their values. And most importantly, the company would not be swayed by bad faith attacks. To further solidify their stance, the statement included direct quotes from Naomi herself, reaffirming her commitment to fairness and integrity. As if on cue, the business publication followed up to confirm Naomi's interview date. Ava worked with her to finalize the details. A direct conversation might help dispel the rumors, Ava said. Naomi nodded. It'll also send a message, loud and clear. On the day of the interview, Naomi welcomed Rachel Simmons into her office. Rachel was a respected journalist, known for her fair yet incisive approach. After a few minutes of pleasantries, they settled into their seats, the city skyline glowing behind them. Rachel's first question was broad. Tell me about your journey to the corner office. Naomi spoke candidly. She talked about her upbringing, the mentors who had guided her, and the challenges she had faced as a woman of color in corporate leadership. Rachel nodded, listening intently. Then the conversation shifted. Let's talk about recent controversies, Rachel said. She brought up the security guard incident, the whispers of internal bias, the accusations against Steele Global. Naomi's gaze didn't falter. We've had to confront bias, both internally and externally, she said. I took swift action because our culture and values matter to me. Every employee, partner, and client must understand that we will not tolerate discrimination. Rachel leaned forward slightly. Some online sources claim your company is actually the one discriminating. How do you respond to that? Naomi's voice remained calm. My stance is clear. Discrimination of any kind goes against my personal beliefs and our corporate policies. She let the words settle. We are running an internal review, and we've initiated mandatory training to ensure every employee feels safe and valued. She took a measured breath. As for the online allegations, we have reason to believe this is a coordinated attempt to damage our reputation. Rachel raised an eyebrow. Do you think it's an intentional smear campaign? Naomi's lips curled slightly. I think Steele Global's success makes us a target. She folded her hands in her lap. But we don't back down from challenges. We face them head on. Rachel studied her. Then she smiled. That's exactly the kind of confidence I expected from you, Naomi. Naomi offered a small smile back. But behind her composed exterior, she was already thinking about the next move. As the interview with Rachel Simmons neared its conclusion, the reporter posed a final, thoughtful question. Do you ever feel burdened by the fact that you represent not just yourself, but also Black women in executive roles? Naomi paused, choosing her words carefully. I do feel a sense of responsibility, she admitted. I've been told before that my presence in certain spaces is unexpected. She met Rachel's gaze. But that only drives me to work harder, not just to prove doubters wrong, but to prove that these roles can be filled by anyone with the determination and skill to claim them. Rachel smiled in admiration. Thank you for your honesty, Naomi. This has been enlightening. Naomi exhaled slowly as Rachel left. She hoped her words would resonate. Would they cut through the noise of controversy? She could only hope. But before she could dwell on it, a sharp knock on her office door. Daniel Carter stepped in, his expression tight. Bad news, he said. Naomi stiffened. What now? Mark's stirring trouble again. Daniel placed a printed email on Naomi's desk. She scanned it quickly. Mark had escalated his attack. He implied that the Steele Global partnership could be in jeopardy if internal issues weren't properly addressed. He referenced the security guard lawsuit, the social media chatter, and other rumors. And worst of all, he forwarded his concerns directly to Richard Langston. Naomi folded the paper carefully. But inside, a slow burn of anger coursed through her. He's trying to sabotage our partnership from within, she muttered. Daniel nodded grimly. Probably looking to gain leverage, maybe a promotion, maybe recognition from his company. Naomi set her jaw. Let's get on a call with Richard immediately. Daniel nodded and stepped out to coordinate. Naomi took a deep breath. Then, she stared at her reflection in the blank computer screen. Once again, bracing for battle. The moment the call connected, Richard's voice carried a note of concern. Naomi, thanks for calling so quickly. I'm hearing conflicting stories. Naomi inhaled steadily. I'm aware that Mark reached out, she said, her tone measured. Let me be clear, we have everything under control. She didn't waver. The lawsuit? An isolated security issue. The social media rumors? A coordinated attack. Our operations completely stable. A brief pause. Naomi could almost hear Richard weighing her words. Finally, I respect that, he said. Mark's concerns seem overstated. He exhaled. He's worried about brand association and possible fallout. But I have faith in your leadership. Relief flooded Naomi's chest, though she didn't let it show. I appreciate your trust, she said. If you have any concerns, my team and I can provide documentation. Richard let out a hearty laugh. No need to bury me in paperwork. His voice lightened. Just keep me informed. This partnership benefits us both, and I have no intention of letting it slip away because of rumors. Naomi ended the call. She let out a long exhale, finally allowing a small weary smile to cross her lips. Daniel exhaled too. That went better than expected. Naomi glanced at Mark's email again. It sounds like he can't poison the well, for now. She set the paper down. But I doubt he'll give up easily. Her expression hardened. We need to stay vigilant. A week later, Steele Global's mandatory inclusivity training officially launched. Employees from various departments shuffled into the large auditorium. Naomi took the stage, microphone in hand. She didn't give a scripted speech. She spoke from the heart. "We are a company built on innovation, respect, and unity." Her gaze swept across the room. "And to stay at the forefront, we must ensure that every voice is heard and that every person is treated with dignity." She let that settle. "This training is the first step in reaffirming our commitment to each other and to the future of Steele Global." Then, she stepped aside. The professional facilitators took over, guiding employees through scenarios on microaggressions, exercises on unconscious bias, discussions on fostering an inclusive work culture. Naomi moved through the groups, observing. Some employees were engaged and enthusiastic, others looked bored or defensive. But overall, she sensed a willingness to learn. By the end, employees filled out anonymous feedback forms. Monica Hayes collected them. "We'll do a thorough review," she promised. Naomi nodded. She had a feeling they weren't done facing resistance. But today was a step forward. Later that evening, Naomi sat in her office sipping a cup of black tea. The city skyline stretched before her. She thought about the security guard lawsuit, the coordinated online attacks, the subtle but dangerous sabotage Mark was attempting, and she knew this fight wasn't over. Her phone buzzed. A message from Vanessa. "Vanessa, got something new on the social media attacks. Call me when you're free." Naomi set down her teacup. Her pulse quickened. This wasn't just a few bad headlines. Someone was actively trying to take her down. And she needed to find out who. In the days following the mandatory inclusivity training, Naomi noticed a subtle but important shift in Steele Global's work culture. Employees, some of whom had been resistant at first, began sharing their own experiences in structured feedback sessions. The conversations were both positive and difficult. Some praised the company's commitment to fostering a respectful workplace. Others hesitated, still adjusting to the changes. Naomi knew change took time. But the fact that people were talking openly, that was progress. The next time Naomi visited the private hangar, she was met by a new security officer. This time, there was no hesitation. "Good afternoon, Miss Steele," the officer greeted her with professional respect. Naomi nodded in approval. The fired guard's replacement was clearly better trained, someone who understood the importance of discretion and professionalism. That chapter, at least, was closed. Despite the internal progress, the social media attacks against Steele Global hadn't stopped. But then, Vanessa Liu walked into Naomi's office holding a file. "I think we found something," Vanessa said. Naomi set down her pen. "Tell me." Vanessa handed her a printed report. A lot of these online attacks trace back to accounts linked to a competitor. Naomi's eyebrows lifted. "Which one?" "Horizon Dynamics." Naomi let out a slow breath. Horizon was notorious in the industry for its cutthroat tactics. If they were behind this, it wasn't random criticism. It was deliberate sabotage. Vanessa leaned against the desk. "I can't prove their CEO signed off on this," she admitted, "but we have enough evidence to show that some of these attacks are being orchestrated from inside their PR division." Naomi's mind raced. She had two choices. 1. Go public and expose Horizon. 2. Handle it privately and leverage it for a strategic counterattack. She tapped her fingers on the desk. "Let me think about it," she said. Vanessa nodded. "Just say the word," she said, "and we'll make sure everyone knows the truth." Later that evening, as Naomi wrapped up her work, Ava walked in, grinning. "Have you seen the latest media coverage?" Naomi shook her head. "Not yet. Been too busy putting out fires." Ava set a tablet on her desk showing the headline from a major business outlet. Steele Global CEO Naomi Steele leading the charge for inclusive innovation. Naomi felt a ripple of pride. The article praised her leadership, highlighting the mandatory inclusivity training, her decisive response to controversies, her unwavering vision for the company. For the first time in weeks, the narrative was shifting in her favor. "This is positive," Naomi said, meeting Ava's gaze. "At least the press sees the bigger picture." "Exactly," Ava replied with a grin. "Not all storms last forever." Naomi closed the tablet, warmth spreading through her. She had faced racism, skepticism, threats, sabotage. And yet, her core leadership stood firm. She knew more challenges would come. That was simply the nature of running an empire. But for now, she allowed herself a moment to breathe. Just as Naomi thought the chaos was settling, she received a request for a meeting from Mark Caldwell. Naomi's eyebrows lifted. Desperation or redemption? She agreed to the call, suspecting the former. Naomi, Mark, and Richard Langston met over video conference. Richard started the conversation, sounding pleased. The first quarter of our partnership has been a success. Naomi nodded. Our milestones are on track, and I appreciate the strong collaboration. Then, Mark cleared his throat. Naomi, I want to offer an apology. Naomi tilted her head slightly. Mark continued. I realize now that some of my concerns were overblown. I may have stepped out of bounds in questioning Steele Global's stability. He exhaled. I see the results of our alliance, and it's clear you've addressed any issues you had internally. Naomi studied Mark's face on the screen. Was this genuine, or just another strategic maneuver? She kept her voice neutral. Apology noted. Richard chimed in. Glad to see you two finding common ground. Our companies have a lot to gain from working together, so let's keep the momentum going. Naomi ended the call with a sense of closure, albeit cautious. Mark had backed down. For now. But in the corporate world, alliances could shift without warning. Still, Naomi chose to focus on the bigger picture. Horizon dynamics had been exposed. The Steele Global narrative was shifting positively. Mark Caldwell had apologized, but could he be trusted? Naomi knew the battle for Steele Global's future was far from over. And the next challenge was already on the horizon. Naomi sat alone in the executive lounge at headquarters, sipping a cup of tea as she gazed out the window. The city lights stretched before her, twinkling like a reflection of the journey she had navigated over the past few weeks. She thought back to that morning on the tarmac, how a simple moment had spiraled into a confrontation, an internal reckoning, and ultimately, a deeper commitment to the values she had built her company upon. She recalled the people who had stood by her. Ava's unwavering support, Daniel's steady hand with the finances, Monica's dedication to human resources, Vanessa's sharp legal instincts, and even Richard's fair-minded leadership. And of course, Mark's resistance had only served to sharpen her resolve. Each challenge had pushed her to either hold her ground or pivot toward a stronger future. With the immediate crisis behind her, Naomi turned her attention to the opportunities ahead. Obstacles would come, that much was certain. They always did. But she trusted her ability to respond with clarity and conviction. She had proven that time and time again, like the day she refused to be detained on her own aircraft and made a stand for her dignity. Setting her teacup aside, she rose and walked to a framed photograph on the lounge's wall. It was from Steele Global's earliest days, just a simple warehouse, now transformed into a thriving enterprise. She traced the edge of the frame lightly, drawing strength from the memory of where it all began. Tomorrow, new deals would be negotiated, new employees would join, new challenges would test her leadership. But Naomi felt ready. She was grounded by a clear sense of purpose, to lead with excellence, to champion inclusivity, and to remove barriers wherever they appeared. In the following weeks, she finalized several initiatives aimed at strengthening Steele Global's company culture. She worked with Monica to develop a mentorship program that paired veteran employees with newcomers, fostering a sense of community. She championed a paid internship program targeting underrepresented groups, opening doors for talent that might otherwise be overlooked. Security training for outside contractors was revamped, ensuring that what had happened on the tarmac would never happen again. As these programs took root, Naomi noticed a shift in morale. Not everyone was immediately enthusiastic, but a sense of momentum grew. Employees began to take pride in working for a company that prioritized ethics and equity, not just profit. Small moments of appreciation emerged. A handwritten note from a junior staffer thanking her for fostering a safe work environment, a quiet hallway conversation where someone expressed how meaningful it was to see a CEO who looked like them leading the way. One afternoon, Naomi received an unexpected visitor, Patricia Lowe from the security firm. She appeared far more at ease than during their previous meeting. Naomi gestured for her to sit. Patricia spoke earnestly. I wanted to let you know we've officially terminated Michael Henderson's contract. Our internal investigation uncovered multiple complaints from other clients about his conduct. His lawsuit threats appear to be nothing more than empty posturing. Naomi nodded, feeling a sense of relief. "Thank you for the update. I appreciate your firm handling this responsibly." Patricia offered a small smile. "We value your business and respect your stance on integrity. I hope this incident won't affect our working relationship moving forward." Naomi leaned back slightly in her chair. "I believe in second chances for companies that take accountability. Let's focus on moving forward together." With that, another loose end was tied up. As Patricia left, Naomi felt some of the lingering tension in her shoulders ease. A situation that could have spiraled into a much larger legal and PR nightmare had been handled decisively. A few moments later, Ava appeared at the door, holding an envelope with a grin. "This just arrived. It's from a community organization downtown." Naomi took it and opened it, scanning the letter inside. "Looks like you've been nominated for an award," Ava said, her smile widening. "They're recognizing leaders who promote diversity and opportunity." Naomi exhaled softly, a quiet sense of pride settling over her. She had never chased recognition. She simply did what was right. But seeing the impact of her work acknowledged reminded her why she fought so hard in the first place. Naomi carefully opened the letter, scanning the words that praised Steele Global's commitment to mentoring individuals from marginalized backgrounds and her personal advocacy efforts. A quiet sense of pride settled over her, mixed with humility. She had never sought recognition. She simply did what was right. But receiving acknowledgement for her work was a reminder of the tangible impact she was making. "This is lovely," she murmured, placing the letter on her desk. "It's good to see that what we're building is truly making a difference." Ava smiled. "Congratulations, Naomi. You deserve this." As evening fell, Naomi found herself with a rare moment of quiet. She sank into her chair, reflecting on the whirlwind of events that had started with that confrontation on the tarmac. She had been forced to assert her authority, to fire someone without hesitation, and to set sweeping changes into motion within her company. At every step, she had faced doubt. Mark's underhanded tactics, the coordinated smear campaign, and the ongoing battle to reinforce Steele Global's values. And yet, she had stood firm. Not only had the company survived the turbulence, it had emerged stronger, more focused, and more purposeful than ever. She tapped out a short message to her mother, letting her know she'd be visiting soon. Then, she scrolled through updates from the mentorship program. Junior employees bonding with experienced managers, sharing ideas, and working on new, innovative projects. This was the true reward: the unity, the progress, the lasting impact. Gathering her belongings, Naomi switched off the office lights and stepped into the hallway. She paused in front of the Steele Global logo, softly illuminated near the reception area. It represented years of ambition, resilience, and an unshakable belief that success could be built with integrity. It was a symbol of what was possible for anyone who dared to dream big. With measured steps and her head held high, she walked out of the building, ready for whatever awaited her next. In the days that followed, Naomi continued to guide Steele Global into new territory. She finalized another major strategic partnership in Asia, further cementing the company's international presence. The internal changes she had fought for were taking root. Employee satisfaction increased and reports of biased incidents declined. The brand's reputation recovered from the smear campaign, bolstered by transparency, ethical leadership, and a renewed sense of trust. One evening, as she arrived at the private hangar for another business trip, she was met by a different security officer. "Good evening, Miss Steele," he greeted her by name, his tone respectful and professional, without hesitation. Naomi felt a quiet sense of satisfaction. Things were changing. A precedent had been set. As she climbed the steps into the jet, she took one last glance at the tarmac, remembering how a single moment of discrimination had sparked a chain reaction that reshaped her company and reaffirmed her mission. She gave a small, confident nod to the new officer, who returned it with professionalism. Inside, she sank into a plush leather seat, her laptop open, reviewing presentation slides for the upcoming meeting. Ava handed her a bottle of water and took the seat across from her. The plane taxied down the runway, engines humming, gaining speed. Naomi felt the familiar push of acceleration as the jet lifted into the sky. She smiled. Tomorrow was another day, another opportunity to make decisions that would shape not just her own destiny, but the future of a company that had become a beacon of innovation and integrity. There would be more challenges, more unexpected turns, but Naomi was ready. She thought of the guard's stunned face when she revealed who she was, the swift decision that followed, the ripple effect it had created. She had never second-guessed that choice. It was both just and necessary. And so Naomi soared onward, literally and metaphorically, secure in the knowledge that leadership was not just about holding a title. It was about standing firm in the face of injustice, building a culture of respect, and never flinching in the presence of doubt. As the jet cruised above the clouds, she closed her eyes, embracing the steady hum of possibility. Her story, and the story of Steele Global, was only just beginning.